Blackballed, 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 blackballed.
What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. We live in a polarized world, and if you ask one side what the biggest problem that is facing society, they will point their finger squarely at the other side, and vice versa. For people like myself who sort of float around the middle, I call myself a moderate. I don't really have political affiliations. I know I don't have any ideologies. I can point my fingers to both sides and say, I think you guys are both kind of like cousins. The left and the right have very different ways of expressing their violent selves. They have very different political beliefs that motivate them. And we are here today to speak to a couple of individuals who say that they have sort of seen the light in a sense and have decided that that sort of fringe extreme viewpoint is not their own. And we're going to have him on soon. But first, I'd like to bring on my next guest. He is a counter-terrorism expert and a professor at Seneca College. He is also a person who has a history of not just tackling and thwarting terrorist attacks, but he also has a brief history of being an extremist himself. And his name is Mubin Shaikh. Mubin, how are you, buddy?
How you doing, man?
Good. What is it like for somebody to wake up one day with ironclad beliefs in some sort of political or religious extremism, and then wake up the next day and think to themselves, I got to stop doing this? Like, what does it take normally for someone to get to that point?
Yeah, good question. You know, of course, nobody has an overnight change per se. I mean, just like a person doesn't get into an extremist movement or extremist ideology overnight, it's usually a collection of things that have brought that person to a particular place in their life where they come to a place where they're more receptive to these sorts of ideas. When, you know, a person can go through, do a kind of, an autopsy, if you will, of the history in life. How, you know, were they born with certain conditions? What were the physical environment in which they grew up? How was their parenting? The parents' influence on them? Were there other things? So we look at all those things that impact a person and bring them to a point where they then go into an extremist mindset. The same thing is in reverse. It's a lesser time that it takes lesser time for a person to get out of a movement than it does to get into a movement. And usually, again, it's a collection of things, right? They're just a number of things could be, you know, happening for that particular person. It could be a personal, individual, psychological thing. It could be something that's, impacted by society or how, you know, society views them. So they might be, you know, aware and attuned to how others in society might view them. Things can just change in their life. You know, there are guys that I know who are former neo-Nazis. He had a kid, his daughter was born, and he realized, man, like what kind of life am I bringing my kid into? You know, that for him, that was the thing. So there are a number of things that could apply to a person depending, you know, on their particular context. And that's generally how somebody gets out.
How important is the sincerity of the former radicalized individual? In other words, if they become, say, an asset or something, or or if they get caught in the middle of a crime and then they're like, oh, I want to change my life around. Is it difficult to sort of weed through that and figure out if a person is being sincere about their transformation?
That's a very good question. I mean, you know, it depends again on the context. So, you know, you'll have just in regular crime, never mind hate and extremism, somebody gets caught, you know, they've never been to jail. Suddenly they're in jail for a while. Jail is shit. They don't like it. They don't want to be there. They want to get out as soon as possible. They realize, okay, I fucked up. I did something wrong. And you know what? They realize, and I can believe that in many cases, you know, sometimes it's just that experience is overwhelming for them. And it sometimes takes an overwhelming experience like that for a person to then be motivated, so to speak. I mean, it's kind of coerced because you're in prison,
Yeah.
but that happens. People, they realize that, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. So, so that's one way to look at sincerity. It depends. You talked about becoming assets, and there's another level to it, if you will, if you want to talk about people who, um, let's say undercover operations. Like, if you need to have undercover operations in extremist groups, you're not going to the Boy Scouts to recruit people to go in. You're going to
Yeah.
recruit people that are familiar with that space and so that's a different thing. They allow you, if you will, the government allows, a person who is extreme to then, even conspire with other extremists, blah, blah, for the purposes of an investigation.
Mhm.
But that's not even disengagement, de-radicalization still, right? A person who is, working as an undercover, let's say, is not necessarily de-radicalized, right? Like,
Mhm.
they could still have, questionable views and whatever else. And the government is always, they'll always be watching for somebody, in that regard.
I
But
saw 24. That was a good show. Yeah.
yeah, well, so I mean, in the real world, in terms of people, people getting out, people realizing that, yeah, you know what, like, where's my life going with this? What future am I putting forward for myself, potentially my children, getting married? Who's going to want to marry you if you're known, or you were known to be like this? So there are many, many issues that start to become apparent to a person, and a collection of those things will then move that person out. So determining sincerity in that is, there are some ways you can see, for example, a person doesn't just change overnight like that. So anybody that's suddenly believing everything you're saying, going along with everything you're saying, I question that person, right? Like, there has to be a back and forth process. You have to be challenging your views, questioning your views. Sometimes people are uncomfortable with those views being questioned, and they might
Mhm.
relapse, so to speak, and double down, back into their ideology. So working through this is that process we may call either disengagement or de-radicalization.
What was your process like from having extremist beliefs or whatever you want to call it, to, obviously, like, not many people make the drastic 180 that you made, where you now are an active counterterrorism expert. But what was and I know you weren't like a terrorist, at least I don't think anyways, but you had extremist views.
No.
I heard you say on the Dean Blundell show once. And
Yeah.
so I'm just curious what the catalyst was for change and how that process was and how long did it take?
Yeah, I mean, so very quickly, my process of getting in was in really, it wasn't getting in, but it was being exposed to that extremist ideology. In the summer of '95, I was in a place in Pakistan. I had a chance encounter with the Taliban while I was there. I talked to them for the better part of a day. They came by in the evening later on. We talked some more, and that was all I saw of them. But I became enamored by their views and became supportive of this idea that Muslims have to engage in jihad, and that's the only way that Muslims will regain their identity or their honor and their dignity again. So I kept that up until the 9/11 attacks happened. And in fact, I should say 98, when I got married, my intimacy needs were met. And I say in self psychoanalysis that it did calm me down a lot. Right. And I kind of was lukewarm about my membership, if you will, until the 9/11 attacks happened. And that's what really made me think, you know what, like, this is not Islam. I can't believe in anything that justifies something like that. So I began and I undertook a study of Arabic and Islamic studies. And so I moved to Syria. I lived in Syria for 2 years. Wow, this is an Amber Alert. Um,
Oh,
okay,
they
so
know what we're talking about. Look at that.
no, it's my wife's phone. I put mine on airplane mode, but
Oh,
I hope they get whatever's going on. But anyways, I went to Syria after 9/11 attack, spent 2 years there studying Arabic and Islamic studies. And that's when I came to realize, even before that 2 year period was up, that, wow, the interpretations I had were all wrong. There's so much more to this. It just really opened my eyes and made me kind of sit back and appreciate the world a bit more.
mhm.
And particularly, I mean, talking about the 180 of how I went to counterterrorism, is I really began to understand and appreciate the rights that we have in the West, in Canada in particular. And so when I came back, that's when, CSIS basically recruited me to work as an undercover with them. And I was more than happy to sign on the dotted line, so to speak, because I had seen how things were outside of the country. And I realized, man, like, we really do have it good here. And I need to make sure that, that's protected. So that's how I got into. So contrary to all this other nonsense that you might hear, people, people are funny. They try to, I guess they want to use this as, oh, you were an extremist once upon a time. And it's like, yeah, I was, for like 6 years. Right. And for the past 18 years, I've been doing counter-extremism, counter-terrorism. So nobody
That
asks,
first 6 years of being of having those ideas, I mean, it's funny because it wasn't intended for that, but I'm sure it helps you, like in how you navigate this side of the coin now, doesn't it? Like, because you know how
yeah.
they think, right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, definitely not just in this space, in this Khawarij, what we call Khawarij in the Islamic terminology, zealots, people who come in the costume of Islam, or whether they're neo-Nazis or whatever, right, left, and people need to hear this, that radicalization is basically, you can understand radicalization as a psychological process whereby people become increasingly extreme in their views. So it's not necessarily linked to violence. Okay. It's a normal process. I want to normalize it. I want to say it's not in and of itself something negative or bad. The roots of this actually came from, when the British monarchy was switching to the parliamentary system, right? The aristocratic system to the parliamentary system. That was considered a radical shift, right? From the way that things were for the longest time and where it's going to be moving to. So that's what they call, radical shift. So that radicalization is this complete shift away from the way things have been for the longest time. And not to say that the way things have been for the longest time are exactly, the best way, whatnot. So, when we say like, Martin Luther King Jr., he was radicalized, quote unquote. Gandhi was, quote unquote, radicalized. But then you get one of the outputs of radicalization is extremism, where basically you believe that, violence in the public space, and I'm simplifying the definition here, is okay. And violent extremism is where you actually do that violence. So my experiences, others from different movements, back in 2011, then Google Ideas, I think now they're called Jigsaw, they had a summit against violent extremism in which they brought 4 categories of people: ultra nationalists, white supremacists, Islamists, and urban street gang members, and under the umbrella term violent extremism, and looked at the ways in which people got into it, people stayed in it, and how people got out. And surprise, surprise, the overlap between those processes is just eerie. So,
yeah, I always found that people got a little bit. I mean, I understand from a legal point of view, but the definition of terrorism, and people would get all upset when someone would commit a mass shooting and it wasn't called terrorism, and it's just like, what is the big deal? That person that killed all those people in Las Vegas by shooting them from the hotel room, why is being a mass murderer? Why is being a mass murderer somehow not as bad as being a terrorist? Like it's just a difference of terminology, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why people have that. I mean, being a mass murderer is the worst thing, other than, I mean, a pedophile, cannibal, I guess. I mean, but the thing with terrorism is that, again, it's very politically loaded. It's usually related to wars that are being fought, or something the government is doing or not doing that's pissing a bunch of people off. So there has to be some kind of political, religious, or other ideology attached to it. So like, for example, terrorism, you can have an attack that is, in the popular use of the term, it is a terrorist attack, but it may not be legally a terrorist attack. So the Quebec mosque shooting, for example, it was a terrorist attack, but it's prosecuted as a mass murder, right? And legally, it's easier to prosecute somebody on murder or attempted murder than it is to argue out, ideology, and did this person actually have an ideology, and thus they're a terrorist.
Yeah, that's a technicality in waiting.
It's a very well, it's more than that. It's like, it's legally, it's easier for them to prosecute, these offenses than a terrorism offense. So you could theoretically just say, just get rid of terrorism completely and just keep prosecuting it as murder or attempted murder. Like in just one more thing, I think it was Edmonton, ISIS guy tried to run over a bunch of people with the truck, tried to kill the cop at the end of it. He had an ISIS flag in the cab with him, like the cab of the truck. They didn't prosecute him on terrorism. They prosecuted him on 5 counts of attempted murder, and that's enough, right? Like, he's going to get, more
Some
than
people
you
like
get.
the pennant just for the color. You know,
Yeah.
they don't
So
not
you can
necessarily.
still you can say that it was a terrorist attack, but it must fit the definition. It has to be threat of violence based on an ideology, change the government, blah blah blah, or legally, socially acceptable use, and then legal
Mhm.
use. So
Okay. Um, we're going to bring in our two guests. Before we do though, I just wanted to ask you about working with people in order to sort of like help them out of believing and acting on those beliefs in the world of extremism. How did you get into that? Is that sporadic for you, or is that something that you do on a regular basis?
I got into it, I guess, helping people get out. So would have been post 2010 because the Toronto 18 prosecution lasted until 2010. War in Syria kicked off in 2011. See the rise of ISIS in real time, and by 2012. By 2013 and 14, I was already engaging with people on a daily basis, basically talking them out or trying to dissuade them from being with ISIS or Al Qaeda or even Taliban. And so I was just doing stuff on my own, kind of. And in some cases it was working, in other cases it wasn't working. And so this is, the U.S. government got in touch with me, and I started working with them, just assisting in, anti-ISIS operations activities. Sorry.
Mhm.
And then by 20, I guess 15, 16, you already had people who were starting to come back or had enough of what they saw in Syria. And this is where the whole returning foreign fighters and de radicalization really started to take off. And so I started working with an organization called Parents for Peace, where I work, regularly now, and we work on different kinds of cases of people who have intersected with extremism, but in many of our cases, the FBI has visited the homes of these people and have decided not to charge them,
Mhm.
or somebody who has been charged and is currently in detention awaiting sentencing. And so we will, through the lawyer, do via WebEx, sessions with them like once a week or whatever it is. So we have a bunch of cases that we do from across the spectrum, left and right, and jihadist. Well, I don't know where that does fit on the right end of the spectrum, but we cover all ideologies.
Okay. On that note, I think we're going to bring in our two guests now. Bryan Trottier, you are a person who has been largely identified with hanging with extremists on the right, and Alaa Soufi, is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes.
Okay. You have been associated with extremists on the left. Bryan, I want to start with you because, from what I understand, Mubin and you are sort of working together to sort of help you through this process. You changed something to your mic, Bryan. I can't hear you.
Hi, sorry about
There you
that.
go. Yep.
Yes, Mubin and I are working together. Mubin and I have a rather interesting history that goes back to when I was working with an extremist group, and I ran the security for an event that Mubin took issue with, and had went online saying he was going to infiltrate, and we caught him, and we caught Mubin trying to sneak in, and so we had some banter for about
I
2
feel like
days.
he let you catch him. I don't know why. I just feel like that.
He was a gentleman. He
Yeah.
was a real gentleman, and so was our guy who caught him as well. But I did have some sort of rapport with Mubin, and when I decided to leave, he was the one I called.
Okay. Let's start a little bit earlier than that, though. I'm trying to figure out if you were you like a bad seed that fell into a crowd that was just as bad as you? Were you influenced by a bad crowd? I know I'm told you have a criminal record, and it stretches back to well before you knew Jeremy McKenzie or Diagolon or any of those guys. So give me an idea of your bio. Like what were the ingredients that sort of led you to Diagolon, for example?
So my bio, I guess, would start when I was a child. I was a very intelligent kid. The school system couldn't find a place for me. They ended up putting me in gifted classes, and that was a whole nother issue and problem. But I was bullied terribly, to the point of being suicidal at 12. I joined the army. I'm from a military family. I got big. I got tough. I had decided to become a bully slayer and devote my life to that. And
Sorry, a
to
bully slayer?
a bully slayer. Yeah.
Oh, like you beat up the bullies.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know it was
So,
called the slayer. I didn't know there was a term for that. That's an interesting term.
well, I made it up, so you're
Okay.
not expected to. But yeah, and so I guess in extremism circles, you could call me a true believer. I was radicalized to the left first, and I fulfilled roles of being a goon in that milieu. For a year, I studied Islam in mosque, um, and none of those really worked out. Uh, the Islamic thing just because of faith issues, and but the left, I watched the left go from the labor left to the identity politics left, and I watched some really good people get really shafted by this new brand of leftists, and I saw what they were, and it motivated me to get out of the left. Um, that was around like 2001.
Hmm.
And after that, I lived a relatively normal life. Until societal trends started going so far left that I saw these people that I had a lot of disdain for through my experience gaining currency, gaining social currency. And then they were the bullies that I felt I needed to slay. I should say that I've very rarely in my long experience in extremism come across anyone who goes into extremism from a position of hate or violence. Everybody thinks they're doing the right thing. Sorry, my dog's on screen here. Yeah, everybody thinks they're doing the better thing, right? You know, for me, the thing that got me into right-wing extremism and noticed by groups on the right, where I very quickly ascended, was the compelled speech bill around trans people that Jordan Peterson had his rally about, and I watched how the left behaved there, and my ex-wife, my wife at the time, was assaulted by an Antifa leftist and was charged, and all of a sudden we were thrust into being the Canada's worst neo-Nazis. Of course, my wife at the time was Jewish. You know, her kid was Jewish, but
what if you end up hating your wife? That point just goes away, you know?
And I'm a Métis man, and both my children are Métis on both sides. It's it's a very oversimplified solution for the leftists to call someone a white supremacist. I see very little of that.
Okay, I just want to run down a couple of things here. And Alaa, I promise we'll get to you in a second. Did you ever SWAT a person?
No, never.
Thomas Zog? No?
No, I did speak to the police when I thought Zog was a danger to people. Zog was on a 5-day, 24-hour binge on the internet, becoming more and more extreme. He was exhibiting weapons and stuff, and I did speak to the police about that.
The one thing that came up with you a few times was that you I don't know if it was the far left when you were part of the right-wing extremist groups or whatever, and also people within your sort of social circle. Have you been accused several times since like 2010 of being kind of like an informant, an undercover informant at places like the G20 and things like that?
I have, yeah. So before this started, we would report the group that I was involved with, which was not an extremist right-wing group, despite what the left might say. We informed the police a number of times about people who were dangerous on both the extreme right and the extreme left.
Okay.
I felt it was my civic duty to do so.
Okay.
I wouldn't have done so. We wouldn't have done so had we not been privy to some pretty serious stuff that they were talking about in back channels and such.
Okay. We'll get back to that because I don't want to spend too much time sort of like looking over your, your spotted history or whatever you want to call it. So, Alaa, I want to talk to you because yours is a little bit different. You were part of at least the social circles of people who were on the far left. I don't know what groups they were. We talked before, but I was a little confused as to what groups they might have been. So we'll just leave the groups out of it, but just that sort of like radical thinking or far left thinking. But it wasn't the actual political beliefs that drove you out. What was it? You had personal situations with friends, and when it came to a head, what happened?
Accusations were thrown, unfounded accusations, but I just felt like there is a sort of fear to even question certain things, like you just. Sorry, it's just
That's okay.
Just a bit fresh for me still.
Okay, so you were. I'm just going to say it. Okay, someone accused you of being a pedophile, and the reason why I'm saying that so kind of like willy nilly is because that is now the hallmark of extremists on both sides. As soon as something happens and they decide that a person is persona non grata, out comes the pedophile accusations. It's got to be one of the most heinous things a person could be accused of, especially obviously with no evidence. And that is really the thing that made you just be like, well, fuck this. I'm not going to hang with these people anymore. That's basically it, right?
Like Bryan said, I saw them for what they are.
Okay.
And it's not like I realized that's not me. It was never me. I just finally saw them.
Mm-hmm. And are you still sort of supportive of those beliefs, though? Not, obviously the way that it ended is awful, and they shouldn't have done that. But I'm just curious as to what your beliefs are, just as an individual, and whether or not they still sort of gravitate towards that extremist side of the left.
No. When I say I don't even I still I never considered myself an extremist. Like I don't like violence. I how can I say, the part of me that wanted, in Bryan's case, the part of me that wanted to not make judgments, to just take a balanced approach. Let him
That's
him
sort of
speak.
like how Bryan right now is trying not to judge you for the pronouns you've listed.
I only noticed now.
Yeah.
Come on, Alaa.
But that's who I always was. To me, whatever I did felt like sort of self-defense, but I don't cling to any of those things. Like when I heard Bryan is having a change of heart, I was willing to believe that. Was willing to find out, not to cling to any notions I had.
Mubin, when you listen to Bryan and Alaa speak, is there a part of you that recognizes the cadence and tone and how they're speaking as where you can sort of tell that they've been on a journey and they'd like to get off the fucking ride now,
Yeah, I don't rush the process. I have learned to really back away from preconceived notions that I may have had about what the process could look like. I recognize that what is true for me is many times not true for somebody else. And, in the beginning when I think on Twitter, I'm taking a break from Twitter, thank God. But on Twitter, when I think Bryan kind of put his story out, and my God, I was deluged is the word, deluged by people who I had no issues with previously, but suddenly they decided that I was persona non grata because I had given Bryan this chance. And it's like I really don't care what people think and like, you know, their opinions, because I know this space. I've kind of explained, I've been working this space inside and out for many years now. I've dealt with many types of people, and I was just kind of taken aback that
That's a weird thing to get mad at you for, because
yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, really? Like, this is what you're
we'd
gonna
much
cut me
rather
off?
Bryan just stay a Nazi. God damn it! What are you doing?
Anyways, yeah, it was just, but it was a lesson to me also that about judging people and their processes and their journeys, is that you really have to let that process, you know, run its course, so to speak. So when you hear both of them speak, you know, they're at different stages in their journey, they're learning certain things, and they're able to process and make sense of those things now. And tomorrow is going to be something else, right? And I don't know what tomorrow is going to be, next month, next 6 months, next year, right? Next 5 years, right? Like they're going to remember these conversations 5-10 years from now, right? And who knows where they'll be at. So when I hear that there is this, you know, like I said, journey of awareness of self and also of the group, then you know that you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
Like something for me, I experienced with like about Bryan, and even before him, there's someone called Josh Chernovsky. A lot of people wanted me to, like, because I was talking to them, wanted me to dictate their journey, what it should look like, and that is something I refuse to do. Like, it should come from him. All I wanted to know is whether he is serious about change, but what that change looks like comes from him, not from me or from anyone else.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like time is really the best arbiter of that. But you know, Bryan, let me ask you something. Is there a make amends phase in your transformation? When I ask that, you know, I don't know what is true and what isn't sometimes when it comes to what people tell me about yourself or other people who are alleged to be extremists. But I hear things like death threats, and he swatted a person. I heard he slept with Jeremy McKenzie's wife or girlfriend or something like that. With like all of these things, not really. And so I'm trying to figure out though the ones that are true, like the things that you've done that were like that. I shouldn't have fucking done that. Is there like an alcoholic kind of idea, like the 12-step idea, where you make amends with people that you've completely hurt? And have you done any of that yet?
Well, there is, and I am an alcoholic, and have been for quite a long time. Yeah, there is. Alaa was the first. Well, the second person. I won't name the first because he's getting a lot of flack off the left lately. But Alaa was the first person.
Respectfully, that could be anyone. Just saying. Someone's getting a lot of flack from the left. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's someone you know. But Alaa was the first who reached out, and the situation with Alaa and I was different because I targeted Alaa because of something he did that he took part in that had nothing to do with me personally.
What was that?
Alaa was involved in an event at Mohawk College where there was an elderly woman who was screamed abuse at. And I really took offense to that because I felt that she was an elderly lady and shouldn't have been subjected to that. So I targeted Alaa. Most of the people that I did target and dox are absolute scumbags of the left. And a lot of them I don't feel bad about targeting. Alaa I did, and Alaa was brave enough to reach out to me when I posted my recanting thread, and was willing to meet up. And the meeting was fraught with fear, I think, on both our sides. I went to Montreal to meet Alaa, and Montreal Antifa are not the Toronto mouthpieces. They've stabbed and otherwise greatly harmed people I know. So I thought I might be being set up by Alaa when I went to meet him. I'm sure Alaa probably felt the same way about me, given the way that we'd both been talked about, because everyone's an expert on Bryan and Alaa who have never met us. And it was just it was wonderful to meet the guy and go and sit and have a pint and talk about what brought us into this, how we look to get out, how we can regain our humanity, because that's what's lost in extremism is your capacity to see the humanity in others.
Yeah, that reminds me. Sorry, go ahead.
It was greatly therapeutic for me. I can't speak for Alaa, but
it was for me too.
Yeah. It reminds me of Daryl Davis, the way that you guys just spoke about meeting and kind of like meeting face to face rather than just being keyboard warriors or whatever. For those who don't remember, Daryl Davis is the black gentleman who became friends with like 100, or at least friends. He pulled out about 100 Klansmen out of the KKK by having a face-to-face relationships with them. And for a lot of these Klansmen, it was like the first black dude they had ever even spoken to in their lives. And you know, a lot of them feel profound shame about that now. When you talk, Bryan, sometimes, even when I was talking to you on the phone and a little bit tonight, there's not a defensiveness, but, you know, like you were like, you know, some of these Antifa people, you know, are kind of pieces of shit. I'm not upset that I dox them. Is there a hypocrisy level that you have to sort of try to get over, where it's like your actions may be the exact same as the other guys, but because you feel like your viewpoint is more righteous, that you're fine with it?
Oh, definitely there's that. And I have to work through that every day. Again, on the defensiveness, I would say that I was targeted by them. I never went and sought them out. So take it as you will.
Well, like these were retaliatory doxings? Is that?
They were, absolutely, okay. Yeah. Which is what makes Alaa different. I didn't like what Alaa did politically, so I targeted Alaa and his family's business and rebroadcast a lot of stuff that was being said about him, and that's to my great shame. I'm sorry I did that, Alaa.
Thank you.
What kind of impact did it have on your family, Alaa?
I shaved my hair because I didn't want to be recognized. Like, it's almost back to the lengths it was during.
Sorry, I'm only laughing because I can't grow my hair. Everyone else recognizes me.
And yeah, like, I don't know if you noticed, I do get this tick sometimes. Just from all that, I guess, anxiety and stress. Like 3 years on, I still like it did.
But was there any like in person blowback, or was it pretty much all digital?
No. Like, thankfully, there was never anything in person. It was just like, but yeah, like, you hear enough threats, you just think one of them or two of them have to be like legitimate. So you just, yeah, you do things like you shave your head to like not get recognized. But like, yes, it had like a big effect, but like, trauma is meant to be faced and healed from, not like clung to and avoided. And that is one of the reasons I wanted to meet Bryan, to like not keep holding that in, to just let it go.
And what did you guys go karaokeing? Did you guys go have coffee? Like, what did you guys do?
We walked around for a bit, then sat at in a patio on the street, and yeah, like, just had a pint and talked for a couple of hours, I believe. And yeah, it was pretty good. It was.
I wasn't expecting that. I knew that you guys sort of knew each other. I knew that there was some static a while back. I didn't know you guys met. Mubin, when you listen to this, these two guys from totally different worlds, both be on the same page about how important it was to meet and to get to know each other in the flesh. How does that make you feel as a person that does what you do for a living?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is, I'm taking notes, you know, I'm learning myself that These are the sorts of things, and we know it in theory, and I've seen it in practice elsewhere. But to see it in practice again before your eyes, it just validates the knowledge that we have. Like those of us that do this work, like we understand that this is exactly what we want to see on those journeys, right? Somebody being brutally self-aware of their situation, of what they've done, what they've gone through, apologizing for it. I mean, I don't think anybody would have expected to hear Bryan talk the way that he's talking. And even for Alaa, like he mentions, it was my wife's phone is going off, and I want to turn my camera off and go there and throw it off the balcony, but I won't. Um, no, it's very important for somebody like Alaa to, like he said at the end, they're very, very important point about not clinging to trauma, right, and freeing oneself from that. And the only way you can do that is really, especially for people, like you're talking about Daryl Davis, who I know very well. He was, helping out Parents for Peace for a while. It's exactly what you need to do. People just, at the end of the day, need to realize, like, when you actually sit with someone,
Walter,
you're dealing with another human being, right, who's probably going through their own shit, just like you're going through your shit. And now you can both go through each other's shit, while you're sitting at a table. Too often people are online. They get, the online activity is creating this melancholy attitude that people have. It's just, shoveling people into this little box, digital boxes. And that's where everyone can be extreme and say this and say that and be angry and this and that. And that's just not conducive to, I think, spiritual health, mental health, psychological health.
And aren't we forgetting the real victim here? Moderates, who you guys used to beat me up on the regular. I used to always tell my editor, it's like on Tuesday I got it from the right, on Thursday I got it from the left. I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to do?
Well, that's how you know you're in the center, right? Because you're getting it. Your shit's coming from both sides.
Yeah, or as they like to call me, a fence sitter. What was the?
Well, there's all these terms, there are all these labels, this, that. Like everyone feels the need to belong to some category and some group and some whatever, and it's just free yourself from that. Free yourself from those shackles, and just take it from whatever side it comes from, and just revel in the fact that you walk the middle way.
Yeah, Bryan, how did you get involved with Diagolon?
So I like I said, this all started with the initial Jordan Peterson rally, and I was noticed by I'd call them a civic nationalist group. They weren't racist. They weren't very far right either. But I did rise very rapidly through it because it was run by veterans. I know how that world works. That's my world that I was raised in and worked in and everything. We were being targeted by the left. We were being targeted by Antifa all the time. As I said, especially this was a Quebec-centric group. And people were being stabbed by these guys. And I found, sorry, I'm trying to get rid of my dog here. Walter, go away.
It's okay. Let the dog do whatever he wants. It's fine.
Yeah. So I found that I was good at finding them, right? I was good at finding them and exposing them. And it started with just exposing them to liability legally for libel and whatever they were doing. And I was picked up by Diagolon, a friend of mine who knew what I was up to, was a leader in that. And they recruited me to do their intelligence.
They called it intelligence?
Intelligence and their operational security and finding threats and moles and outing their enemies and
sometimes
finding out where people live. Just basic open source intelligence.
I mean, it sounds militaristic, but
it is extremely militaristic.
But the guys that you see that are part of Diagolon don't seem to be all that sophisticated. Like I would hazard a guess that a lot of them don't have the follow through to be really like effective at being whatever a Diagolon soldier is.
Yeah, that'd be accurate. The problem being with any stochastic terrorism, there's always a friendly sausage maker somewhere in the wings.
What does that mean? I don't know what scotastic means, whatever that word was. And then the sausage making analogy just totally went over my head.
Okay. Stochastic terrorism being like irony poisoning and baiting people against the other side, hoping that someone somewhere will do something. The friendly sausage maker is what Corey Huron, who drove to Rideau Park with the truck full of guns and crashed through the gate, he was referred to as a friendly sausage maker.
So what influenced him to do that? Because I might be missing a key point that you're making. I'm just trying to figure out what prompted him to. Why is he a friendly sausage maker? Because he
made sausage. He was a butcher. He was just a regular butcher from, I think, Saskatchewan or Alberta, and he decided he had heard enough about Trudeau on the news and through all our different social media channels that he would drive across country with a truck full of guns and crash through the gates and have a talk with Trudeau. And
so was that like, were people trying to egg him on to do something, or is he like a lone wolf, Mubin, where he's just influenced by media and digital, whatever, and he just did what he did?
Yeah, it's the same. It's the whole point about stochastic terrorism is that the irony poisoning is done by the main speakers, the ideologues, the popular or known members, with the knowledge that some random dude is actually going to get up and do something. And so this Corey Huron was that random dude, and he, like, they called him the media reports were that he was a friendly sausage maker.
Yeah, when you said that, Bryan, I thought you were talking metaphorically. There's always some guy that makes this friendly sausage maker, but you got to look out for those guys. And I'm just like, I have no idea.
For the record, I'm not advocating anyone make sausage of any politicians, metaphorically or literally.
The media? No,
need to clear that up.
Don't answer that. Okay. How do we know if you're being sincere, Bryan? Like, how do we know that these beliefs
I
that
guess
you have...
don't, James. I guess no one ever will. But I think people with goodwill will extend at least a feeler out, like Alaa did. Our meeting could have went either way. Alaa's
when was that meeting?
Mine. What, a month ago, Alaa?
More than I think closer to 2.
Okay.
And Alaa, his point was, I want to look in your eyes and hear your voice. And if I believe you, I believe you. And he may not have. And that would have been fine too. We both would have made the effort, and that would be something as well. But people have to extend themselves on both sides, on every side. It is, especially, as you said, the moderate majority, what we'd call normies in our world, have to extend themselves.
Normies. We try to extend ourselves, and we get hit by both sides. Then we try to ignore both sides, and both sides get bigger or at least louder. It's kind of an impossible situation for people in the middle. And what ends up happening is that people on the left, key messages on the left, get absorbed by normies as if they're mainstream. There's a whole bunch of stuff that the left has brought into the lexicon of mainstream society that a lot of people think is bad shit, but it's the domain of the left now. It's the domain of mainstream now, because it's really the ongoing fear of optics that corporations and media outlets and famous people and everyone has. I still do. I whenever I post something that's a little bit whatever, like that takes a run at both sides or one side, I'll get messages from people that are like, I just want to let you know that I agree with you, but if I say so publicly, I'll get fired from my job.
I get it every day. I've had 30 of those messages in the lead up to our conversation tonight.
But some of the things are so innocuous. Some of the things are like, I like Black Lives Matter as a phrase, but I don't think I really like the political organization that much. And people are afraid to say that even out loud. And that's the weird world that we live in, because I'm not a libertarian, so I don't join or support libertarian groups. So why would I support or join a Marxist group? Like, it doesn't. And even when you say that, people are like, why are you pointing out their Marxism? And it's just like, that's what they say they are. I don't know what to tell you. Alaa, you still, I I asked you this. I don't know if I appreciated the answer or if I remember the answer, but are you have you just removed your belief system from that Antifa kind of world, or no?
No, my belief system is still pretty much intact. For me, it's a lot more I'm disillusioned with the community.
Right.
Like the community around them is problematic, but not the beliefs themselves.
It's interesting. You guys are perfect representations almost of like the sides that you kind of rep, because a lot of lefties are similar to you, Alaa. They're like, well, the beliefs that I have are still great. I just don't like the people that speak about them loudly. And then Bryan, yourself, it would be really impossible for you to have that position, because that would be racism and anti-Semitic behavior and all this kind of stuff that would fall down on the far right. Like, you would have to disavow the beliefs on the far right. Whereas on the far left, even though I disagree, I think you probably, I think there's a ton of stuff on the far left, especially Antifa, that I would strongly disagree with. But you don't seem to have that issue, Alaa. So I'm just curious. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, like Antifa, like the meaning of the word is anti-fascism. So like it's, as an idea, it's not something you should be against. But like, I think the problem is it, like, a lot of these ideas are good on paper, but just on, like, practically they fall short. You know, like the idea of anti-fascism is to just be against hatred and intolerance. But what I kind of feel is they just have their own version that they justify. Like, and yeah, like I said, like I did not want to cling to anger and hatred, and I didn't do that with Bryan, you know, but a lot of people were against me talking to him because they do actually want to cling to their fear and anger. They don't actually, like, they talk a big game, but they don't really live up to what they preach. I feel.
They're like political vandals, I used to call them. Right? Like, you know, like they get giddy for almost being mischievous. You know, like it's a game to a lot of those people. So I do understand that.
Like I actually described it today to Bryan as they dangle a carrot in front of you that they have no intention of giving to you.
I do that to my kids, except it's like a chocolate.
Yeah,
right
like like the whole idea is that we're against your behavior, not your skin color or gender expression. And if you just like hold yourself accountable and grow always forgiven, that's the idea, but they don't really allow that to happen.
Mubin, how long would it take for you to deprogram Alaa into thinking that Antifa was a shitty organization?
No, we don't do timings like that.
Yeah.
But you asked an interesting question to both of them about, you know, what's the status of your views and your ideas. And this is the thing, when you go through this almost enlightenment period where you start to see whether it's the, you know, aspects of the ideology itself, or if it's the aspects of the grouping to which you belong or that ideology is represented. And this disillusionment is actually a very big, you know, factor in somebody kind of shifting, not necessarily ideologies, but just shifting the way in which they perceive how those ideas need to be put into practice, right? So a lot of times things come down to tactics, right? Like, so for example, you know, in Sweden, you had a bunch of, you know, Somali kids who wanted to go join ISIS or the Al-Shabaab. And, you know, their thing was I guess the government's program there that they had was, look, you can be Al-Shabaab. You can, you know, say, yeah, Al-Shabaab, rah, rah, rah. You just can't do Al-Shabaab. So that's an example of somebody like, you can have this very extreme ideology, and believe that, you know, everybody is bad, everyone's going to hell, blah blah blah, but you're not going to do anything about it, right? You're not going to go and burn down this place or bomb that place or assassinate that person, right? So that shift away from, you know, the utility of tactics and what works, and from any ideology,
Attends.
is a very important aspect of
Oui.
somebody's journey, you know, out of more extreme elements of the ideology.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's I remember reading about after World War II, they did the Nuremberg trials, but then all the Nazis that gave up the most robust and plentiful whatever information to the Americans were treated nicely, you know, and a lot of them apparently broke down into tears after months and months of like sharing what they could and being treated like a human being. And they literally lost their shit and just bawled and sobbed because they realized, oh my God, I was part of something that was truly evil. You know, obviously I'm not calling either of you guys Nazis. Bryan, I may have a year ago. But it does have that feel to it, like where, like Bryan,
Yeah.
when was the last time that you feel like you did something that was the old you, and what was it?
Interesting question. I've not done anything for a long time, for like since January, anyways.
When you say a long time, I thought you were going to be like 2016, 2017, something
No,
like that.
no,
Yeah.
since January, which is a long time for me within my own little extremism time frame here.
What was that? What did you do in January?
I outed somebody. So for me now, it's more about, as Mubin was saying, it's about not doing things. I'm aware of a lot of people who are after Karima, for example, now, and their names and their addresses. I'm not going to out them. Things will work out how they work out with her case and whatever. I would have been all over it a year ago. I would have wanted them to live in the fear that they made everyone else live in. Now I focus on myself, on improving myself. I don't need to be the main warrior in the fight anymore.
Were you able to salvage relationships with your daughters?
Well, my relationship with my elder daughter is very good.
Okay.
My relationship with my younger one has been pretty much non-existent for about a year. Her mother is a radical communist. She's a professor of Marxist studies. So we had a counter-radicalization fight with my daughter, both of us trying to brainwash her. She didn't take very kindly to it on either end. That's still to be resolved. I hope it will be.
I would just like to say about that this really is me, and I feel she should give you a shot, and because you are genuine, and she should hear you out.
Okay. We're gonna wrap up soon. I that was great, actually, Alaa. That's it's weird for me to see that. I'm only used to seeing the far left and far right people just try to throttle each other online. So this is maybe not a first, but it feels like a first for me, at least a first on my show, to listen to you guys talk like that. Bryan, I got a lot of emails when I said that I was inviting you on, and a lot of it was like, don't believe a word he says, and this, that, and the other thing. I'm a person that tries to take everyone at their word. And the only reason that I'm not disbelieving you, I think I'm agnostic as of right now. And I don't think you should take that in a bad way. That could have to do with the fact that I'm not very informed as to what you're going through now, what you've done, but how invaluable is it to have this relationship with Mubin?
It's a very valuable relationship. He's a sounding board. He understands, without working within the same extremist framework, he understands the ideas, the temptations that come with being attacked constantly after you're trying to extricate yourself. which is invaluable. Mubin's my rock in this, and Parents for Peace. I've got to give them a shout out. They've probably saved what's left of my life.
Mubin?
I paid him to say all of that, so thank you for. I've done the transfer. Yeah, look, I'm glad you had this conversation. We had this conversation. I know, everybody has. I'm sure you. I'm 100%. I can imagine the messages you received and all the things about some of us, all of us, whatever. But look, at the end of the day, you realize, right? I mean, there's a lot of noise online, and that's what even for me, even now, I'm still going through things myself, right? Like I wanted to get off social media because no relation to Alaa, but I follow the Soufi path, like real Soufi way. And I don't like the fact that I felt like I need to respond to things and talk about things. I said to myself, like, who am I that I should be like this? And let me prove to myself, I'm going to just get off of social media and see how it affects me. And am I thinking about it all the time? So this kind of healthy relationship stuff, like this is unrelated to the countering extremism stuff, but it just shows you that we as individuals, we just need to be aware of our situation, where we are, how much are we clinging to those traumas, those ideologies, and whatever else, and break that cycle, man. Get out, meet people, have a pint if that's what it takes. So
yeah. Mubin Shaikh, Bryan, Trottier, Alaa, Soufi, thank you guys for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
welcome.
See you guys.
Good day.
Okay. I had no idea how that was going to go. I think it went well. I'm sure I'm going to get people that say I hit at least Bryan with kid gloves. I don't think I did. I'm just not very Geraldo about the way I ask questions, but I don't know how mean I have to be when I ask someone, what's the last shitty thing you did? Like that's one of the interesting aspects about all of this is trying to sort of navigate the waters of, and whether or not the people that I just had on my show, I know Mubin is he's rock solid. I get that, but as far as Alaa and Bryan go, I don't know. Like it's weird. It's I don't know how to interpret someone in a transformational phase and then lock down on their sincerity. And maybe that's not really my job. I don't know. It would be interesting to see how it all plays out. I avoided the Jeremy McKenzie topic as much as possible, just because I know that a case is happening and the involvement of Bryan in that case just it wasn't good for anyone to even nibble around the edges. But I think that was a productive conversation. I'd like to hear from you guys. Let me know what you think. Give me an email, send me a Twitter DM or whatever. Yeah, that was interesting. On Friday, I have U2 superfan and teacher Mark Baker on the show, and David Wallace will be here tomorrow with a special guest who I'm only teasing you about this special guest because we haven't actually confirmed him yet, and I don't want to count my chickens. But if we land him, that'll be probably newsworthy. Yeah, because I said that aloud. The universe, whatever the fuck that is, will probably take that guest away. And that's how it goes. Okay. But until then, we will see you next time on Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed.